everything that lives is designed to end. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death. Is this a curse? Or some kind of punishment? I often think about the God who blessed us with this cryptic puzzle, and wonder if we'll ever have the chance to kill him.
NieR Automata is a third-person action RPG released in 2017 and was developed by Platinum Games, published by Square Enix, and directed by Yoko Taro.
NieR Automata is a sequel to the 2010 NieR, which itself is a spin-off and sequel to the Drakengard series. Despite it being a sequel, none of the lore of the older games really matters that much for NieR Automata. According to Yoko Taro, the series creator, he focuses on the theme and the emotional peak and builds the plot around those, and in that way, he writes the script for his games backwards.
I design games and write stories, but my goal is to cause an emotional stir inside the player's brain. So, the fundamental goal isn't inside the game sitting in the middle, it's the event that occurs inside the player's brain. This is the goal we must consider most important.
Yoko Taro has a very eccentric personality, much to the amusement of his fan base. He rarely is seen without wearing his favorite mask, and in the public ie, frequently does stuff like this.
NieR Automata T-shirt! NieR Automata T-shirt! NieR Automata T-shirt! NieR Automata T-shirt! Square Enix!
And his oddball personality is often reflected in his games. Take, for example, the design of 2B in NieR Automata.
So I wanted to ask you about that. My question is, obviously with characters like Kanye, there was like a backstory to her looks. There was something to it. Can I expect some like a backstory explaining her design, because why does a battle robot look like this? Or was it just because her designer really likes big thighs and pretty women?
女の子が好きなだけです。
No, I just love women. There's no particular reason for it.
However, Yoko Taro's goofy personality is an interesting contrast to his games that tend to focus on heavy topics such as the meaning of life and humanity.
NieR Automata aims to challenge your perception of self and question what it really means to be human. We will start by unpacking each of the characters, the human-like traits they exhibit, and their views on what defines humanity.
So this is only going to cover the first third of the game or so, which is 2B section of the game. The androids themselves they're supposed to be what you typically see in media of androids, created by humans and to look like humans, but are made up of artificial parts. But they do seem capable throughout the entire game of emotion. Like, whenever you see them, most of the androids are emoting in some way and seem very human-like. And the androids themselves are supposed to be fighters fighting against machine life forms, which are smaller, little, more robotic machines, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
The androids have an organization called Yorha, where each android is either like a battle unit or a scanner or an operator, and they all have their different roles in the fight against the machines.
5012 AD. The year mankind's glorious history came to a sudden and abrupt end, when the world was invaded by aliens from beyond the stars. The aliens unleashed a new breed of weapon, machine life forms, that all but annihilated human civilization. The handful of survivors that remained fled from Earth, seeking refuge on the moon. 5204 AD. Humanity launched its counterattack, deploying an army of androids from a network of orbiting bases. But after more than a dozen large-scale descents upon the enemy, we still haven't managed to repel the invaders.
The perception that androids have of machines, at least when you start the game, is what you would think of like machinery today. They're not as advanced as androids, and certainly not capable of displaying any emotion or any human traits at all. In fact, they're supposed to be like the exact opposite of what a human would be. But as you start to play the game, you encounter these machines that have left their network, which is their
collective consciousness, pretty much. Like they were all on one single network, so they didn't have much individuality, but some machines developed it and disconnected from the network in order to be themselves and form their own communities instead.
Right, and so pretty early on in the game, you get to meet a host of different communities that are made up of these machines. So, for example, Pascal's village in the forest.
Right, and then there's the carnival, where it's just an amusement park full of machines just having fun and living life, and all they know is how to have fun at the amusement park the whole time.
Right.
And they're completely peaceful, never attack you or anything. But then you do also have like a community of androids in the desert that they're all terrified of you and try and kill you and just want to live in the desert. Well, now granted they attack people in the desert, but they're still their own community in a way. Yeah, and then there's like the forest, which has the forest king and his whole community, where they establish a monarchy with one great machine that rules all of them. So there's a whole community of machines in the forest that all worship this one king of theirs that leads them. So you see different communities taking on like different human cultural elements, like Pascal's village are just almost like an ideal communist society where everything is shared equally and everybody loves each other and is having a great time. And the amusement park is just, I don't even know what to call that. It's just people having fun. Then there's the forest where they accept like an absolute monarchy.
Yeah, I feel like the different classes or class systems that machines have established is really interesting, at least seeing it from the first time perspective, thinking that, oh, machines are just machines, that there's no way that they can comprehend these, like, not obscure, but kind of, like, these class structures that humans have developed, or...
The class systems that we've developed are very abstract concepts, and, like, society in general is pretty abstract. So it's interesting seeing the machines and having take these very, very human concepts that, I mean, are kind of seen in animal kingdoms as well, with, prides and that kind of thing,
But even, like, the animal kingdom or humans are seen as having a soul and, like, a conscience versus, you go into the game thinking that at least machines don't have these mechanisms. But I feel like once you're introduced in the game, that, like, gets the ball rolling and you just see the progression of humanity even though there's no humans,
So, like, for example, in the desert, you're forced to kill the machines there because they attack you. But when you go to the amusement park, you don't have to kill a single machine, because none of them even try and attack you. They just ask you to have fun with them and enjoy the amusement park with them. And even when a giant tank with like 10 machines on it comes out, it just starts shooting out
like
confetti and everything, and fireworks and all that. So even when it looks threatening, like, sometimes they just won't attack you anyway. So for 2B herself, at the start she's pretty stoic, doesn't like to show off her emotion a lot. She's kind of unwavering. She's just an android, and she feels like she should not express any emotion. Her only task is to complete missions, and she believes that the machines are simply the enemy. They don't have emotions or anything like that.
So in the earlier part of the game, the dialogue between 9S and 2B seems very one way, because 9S is, in a sense, like, I think the model for humanity in this game.
Yeah.
So he...
almost like the player surrogate.
Yeah, exactly. So by being paired up with 9S, you can see, like, 2B's breakdown over time.
For instance, near the beginning, she just kind of blows off 9S. He asks her to, call him Nines.
Or use his nickname.
Yeah, use his nickname of Nines. And she just kind of blows him off. But then partway through the game, she kind of does it. But then by the end of the game proper, she does eventually call him Nines.
A couple hours into the game, you start to see her answers become more and more human, or she becomes more and more lenient in what she, I guess, is, like, allowing herself to feel, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And as far as by the end, her views on what humanity is and everything, she doesn't really seem to express that too much. You can only really imply that she's not too sure what humanity is and what it means to be human. But what she does know is that the machines and the androids are almost one and the same. They all feel emotions, they have connections to each other, and she starts questioning, well, what is the difference between a machine and an android then? That they're all, in a way, human,
Right.
So 9S is kind of like a much more human android. He's very cheerful, he wants to be friends with everyone, almost flirtatious with 2B sometimes. He gets embarrassed constantly, and he's very human, and it kind of expects everyone else around him to be more human than they're comfortable with sometimes. Especially 2B, he tries to open up to her and tries to make her be more open from the beginning. and it doesn't really happen until like a little bit over halfway through the game.
But he's definitely the driving force, if you will, behind 2B's
development throughout the game.
Yeah, exactly.
And 9S ends 2B section of the game pretty much the same as he started, but I guess a little more willing to see machines as having emotions and more human.
Yeah, I think that's like the biggest change. Like, as you said, he doesn't become more human because he starts out very in tune with his emotions already, but I think he also came to Earth thinking that machines were, not conscious life forms, and ended up seeing that as reality when they're on Earth. And I feel like seeing the machines helps him question his own humanity a little bit more, not afraid to be in tune with his human emotions.
Rather than starting closed off, he starts open and becomes more open by the end of 2B section of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then he does go through more development later on in the game, but for now we're just going to be talking about that first part. So the next character we're going to be talking about is Adam, who is a machine born from the network. It's kind of hard to explain. He's created by a bunch of machines all clumping up into one area, and then he just is born out of it. And he looks a lot like an android. He has the white hair like the other androids do. He has almost the same style of clothing sometimes as well. But the difference is he's a machine life form. He's not an android. He's made from machine parts, just like the rest of the machine life forms. And when you first meet him, he's just born and doesn't really know anything that's going on. But by the time you next meet him, after his brother is born alongside him, once you meet them again, Adam takes an interest in humanity and wants to figure out what the deal with humanity is, and wants 2B and 9S to retrieve and dissect them so he can just learn more about humanity. So for him, Adam isn't sure what humanity is or what it means to be human, and he's curious about humanity and what they were all about because of that. Throughout the game, he does get more and more interested in humanity and discovers more and more about them, from talking to his brother about how, we need to eat food because humans gained great knowledge from eating food over the years, and we need to wear clothes because in human times it was seen as disrespectful or rude to have genitalia showing. Throughout the game, he keeps developing more and more of an opinion on humanity and what humanity is. He created entire replica versions of human cities out of parts and materials that he could produce in order to replicate humanity more. In the end, by the time your final confrontation with him, he comes to the conclusion that humanity is all about conflict, and that's what it means to be human, is to be all about conflict, and no matter what, that there's going to be conflict in humanity. But he also thinks that life itself is meaningless without death, and severs himself from the machine network in order to truly die, because he doesn't think someone is truly alive unless they can also die. And so the conflict that he was in before had no meaning to him, because there was nothing for him to be afraid of, or there's no way that he felt like he was living until he could actually die and have conflict that way. And in the end, even when he died, he seemed almost like kind of at peace with it, because he felt like he had lived and that he was human by the end.
Eve comes in shortly after Adam, correct?
Yeah.
And is he born of the same mass?
So he just kind of like comes out of Adam.
Oh, that's right, he splits.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's not even he splits, it's just another body comes out of his body, and it looks identical but sounds slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
But then later, Eve, the second body that comes out, does like cut his hair and makes himself distinct from Adam.
I guess compared to his brother, because that's what he calls Adam, Eve doesn't really care about humans the way Adam does. Life for him would be meaningless if his brother wasn't alive, because that's all he's focused on. He wants to just go play with his brother.
Yeah. Even when like Adam has Eve eating fruit and reading books, and he's going, well, machines don't have to do this. We could just absorb all the information immediately. And,
right.
We don't need to eat.
The concept of play and fun is also tied in with like emotion. So it's interesting that he doesn't hold the same interest in humanity, but is, I guess, I don't know, in a sense,
just as or more human than Adam.
Exactly, yeah. He seems almost more human than his brother, because his brother's trying to figure out humanity, and Eve doesn't have to do the figuring out, because he, I guess, is already experiencing what, maybe without his knowledge, what it feels like to be human.
Which is interesting. So on the one hand, you have Eve already kind of knows what it's like to be human and doesn't realize it, but at the same time, almost doesn't want to be human-like. He only reads and eats because his brother tells him, oh, you should do this because it's what humans did. We want to know more about humans. And even like Eve's almost kind of more like a newborn, it seems, compared to Adam, whereas Adam keeps like advancing. Eve just like stays childish and he wants to play with his brother, and then when his brother ends up dying, Eve throws a huge tantrum, it seems like, where he's almost childlike in that sense.
It's interesting to look at all the different characters and see which like part of humanity they were assigned almost.
Yeah, so I guess if we were to talk about that for a bit, Adam would be the scientist, the one seeking greater knowledge, whereas Eve would be almost like he got the child aspect of humanity. And then Eve in general, his entire character kind of revolves around Adam and how he does see life as meaningless without his brother, to where by the end of 2B section of the game, Eve doesn't care if he lives or dies. Like he doesn't care about anything anymore because his brother's gone. His entire world's gone to him.
I guess in a sense is similar to Pascal's vision of humanity, which is like very family and community centered.
Yeah.
And of course, Eve doesn't have the, I guess, awareness to realize that's what he's feeling.
Like we were saying, he doesn't realize maybe that he has these human features, but he is very human in his own way. And yeah, I think that's a good segue into Pascal, who is one of the machines that disconnected from the network along with many other machines and formed their own little community. And Pascal, I think, is really interesting. He identifies as being a male robot, but uses a female voice, like a very distinctly female voice, because it comforts the children more, and he wants to just make sure the children feel comforted and everything, and wants to almost like a motherly figure to the children, despite being a male robot and everything. I think works really well.
Which is an interesting concept in itself, to choose a gender
for a robot.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I guess it made more sense with Adam and Eve because they had humanoid figures or shape, but yeah. I mean, Pascal looks non-binary.
Yeah.
You know, but
Pascal looks very much like a regular machine. So.
Yeah, you were talking about how Pascal's vision of humanity is very much rooted in community and family.
Motherhood is like such a central thing to humanity, where it's like, you know, the child usually has more of an attachment to their mother, at least for a certain number of years, and, you know, they're more soothed by their mother's voice and everything, and they have just like such an intense connection with their mother. It's interesting that Pascal really wants to replicate that connection, despite possibly not even knowing if humans had that kind of connection to begin with. It might just be a thing that he naturally wants to provide.
Right, and I think that's part of the mystery and concept of the game, is how are these machines coming upon these concepts, you know, without having any contact in humanity. And maybe they don't need contact with humanity or to have heard about it before, because maybe that's just life itself is innately like creatures will display human traits. Exactly.
Like, machines do have knowledge of humans because they had access to history documents pretty much, where they'd find books or something and just instantly scan them or go through the entire history of humanity that they could find and everything. So they did have remnants of culture and of human culture to replicate and base themselves off of. But they developed farther beyond that, like independent of the things they found about humanity. Near the beginning of the game, they bring up how when 2B and 9S go to the desert, they find machines that are speaking, and they're saying die or kill, and I'm scared and everything. And this is the first time, presumably, that they've heard machines speak, or at least it's a fairly recent thing. So it's interesting that for the thousands and thousands of years that machines have been on Earth, they didn't really develop a speech pattern until very recently in the game time. You know, and at first 9S and 2B think that the machines don't know what they're actually saying, and they're just throwing out random words. But even from the moment they start speaking, they know what they're saying, and they know what everything means. So it's just interesting that they had this knowledge on humans for so long, but they either didn't know enough, or they just didn't actually start developing language until fairly recently. Even if they had the emotions before, they didn't have the language to express it to each other as individuals until fairly recently within the game. Near the end of 2B's section of the game, Pascal asks 2B to help him with a peace treaty that Pascal's making between himself and another group of machines. You go to the factory to investigate it, and they kind of throw you off at first a little bit. Like, they seem very creepy and a little weird, and you eventually get to the throne room of their leader, and their leader's head falls off. He's also a machine. His head just falls off, and he is dead, presumably. We don't know if the other machines killed him, or if he just somehow died naturally, or had always been dead for a long time. But the other machines talk about, like, before that in previous rooms, they talk about God and, you know, their belief in God and death and all that. And which another interesting thing is machines taking over the concept of religion when they presumably don't even have a soul to begin with. And in the NieR universe, I'm pretty sure it's like a thing that humans definitely have souls, or that living creatures have souls. So it's interesting that even if they had data on humans having souls, that they have to acknowledge that they don't have souls, likely, or maybe they just don't even realize that, but have this anyway. But they, after their leader dies, they start yelling about how he became a god, and how you will all become as gods, and we will all die and become as gods together. And they just start trying to kill 2B and Pascal so that they can all become as gods. And as you make your way through the factory fighting off the cult of machines, eventually they just decide to kill themselves and become as gods themselves. They decide it's time, they're going to become as gods, and they all start jumping into the lava and yelling, "Become as gods." Some of them are scared. They're saying, I don't know that do I want to do this? And they go, "Come on, brothers, let us become as gods," and all chant "Become as gods" as they jump into the lava together.
Wow.
Which, on the surface, sounds kind of funny. Like, honestly, like machines killing themselves to become as gods. It's just so weird a concept. And the first time I played through the game, I found it really funny and, like, walked away going, that was a weird and funny part of the game. And then the most recent playthrough, I almost found it more disturbing, because, like, there is no afterlife for these machines. There is nothing for them. They don't have souls or anything. Their beliefs are, in this case, definitely wrong. They're not going to have anything after this for them. So
I guess it may have been more disturbing in a way because you view these machines as human, because they display so many human traits that even though they aren't, you still have the innate, like, human respect for them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just like how you don't like every human on the planet, but you can acknowledge that they have a soul and deserve basic human rights, you know?
Yeah.
Like this idea of humanism that came about after the Enlightenment era.
Very fitting for NieR. So.
Yes.
So I think ultimately what Pascal's view on humanity is that it's love and family and community and everything. It's what, honestly, probably most of us view humanity as, almost, that we are this big community and that we should really realistically try to treat each other the best that we can and everything. But Pascal seems to be one of the only machines that really understands that, along with the rest of his village, and so that's his, like, view on humanity compared to everyone else's.
I think that's why, I don't know if this goes for all players, but at least when I was watching the playthroughs, like, I related to Pascal the most out of a lot of the machines that you encounter.
Yeah, and the game does a really good job of making you feel for Pascal and really want him and his village to be safe, because they're just genuinely good people trying to live their lives as, even though they're machines. So, and compare that to Adam, who, even though his idea of humanity is kind of correct in a way, that there's always going to be conflict in humanity, most likely, that was the conclusion he came to, and even if he's semi-right about that, it doesn't make his want for others to feel pain any better, because, like, he still inflicts pain on 2B and 9S willingly. And the same thing with Eve, despite his childlike innocence, then you do feel bad for him because of that. He still inflicts pain on others, whereas Pascal and his group, they're just completely peaceful and don't want anything bad to happen to anyone.
Because, I mean, this is like a philosophy question, but are humans, like, inherently evil or good? Is kind of like, I think, the idea that comparing, Pascal and Adam and Eve, comparing their points of view, I'm more inclined to lean towards Pascal, that humanity is based around love and community, and I feel like really bad things have to happen for humans to feel like they need destruction, but that's, again, inevitable. Part of the humans, I guess, the cycle of life.
Is that people cause pain and there's conflict to everything. So in a way, each of them are correct about their own views of society and all that.
Well, I mean, like, even having different points of view is human. Does that make sense? There's no way that everyone can agree. I think part of humanity is that you have your own conscience and you can make your own decisions and act on them. And I feel like the machines embody that overall, not overview of humanity, but essentially.
But yeah, kind of when you combine all their points of view and everything, it kind of makes up the basics of humanity almost. Like, we are creatures of love and hate and conflict and, you know, but also of kindness and everything and community, so. So, while 9S's development in the first third of NieR Automata is very flat, it goes through a flat character arc of, he doesn't really change a whole lot. The only thing that really changes is his viewpoint on the machines and them developing personalities and everything. However, in his own route, where you play through the same story as 2B, but with 9S this time, you kind of start to see how he evolves over time. For example, at the very beginning of the game, you see, from his perspective, a machine that was injured in the assault on the factory by 2B and her squad. You see a machine like lying dead there, and his brother machine, in quotes, trying to give him oil and do something to bring him back, but nothing will work. And 9S just kind of looks on and goes, yeah, just give up. Like, there's no point in you trying to bring him back. He's just a machine. But then as you go throughout the game, you experience these like almost memories of machines in form of like picture book cutscenes, where 9S is narrating and talking about the history of these machines, like in the amusement park, the machine that you fight there at the end as a boss fight, how she started out as just a machine looking for love and attention and ended up becoming like a monster and being driven insane due to her want and need for attention, and adding more and more accessories onto herself, eating machines and androids, trying to just make herself prettier and better. You learn backgrounds like that and about the Forest Kingdom and what really happened to their Forest King and everything. 9S starts to relate more to these machines, and you start to relate more to these machines because through the first time through, you don't see any of this. You just think they're machines and they might have their own backstories, but you don't know about them. But 9S, it's assumed through his hacking, kind of almost experiences these memories for himself. And by the end, and you see how he comes to accept these machines and their emotions over the course of the game.
It makes sense to me why 9S is more emotional than 2B ever was. You know, even though she does grow in the end, he's just on another level of understanding that I don't think she ever reaches. But again, I think that's just because of their design is different, because 9S is designed to actually learn things, and 2B
and adapt and everything.
Exactly, and 2B is...
She's just a battle model. She's meant for only combat, but she does, of course have the capacity for emotions, just like any other Yorha androids, but she tries to suppress them because she feels like she's supposed to be just a pure battle model and not supposed to actually, you know, show off these emotions that she has. But once you reach the end of 9S's section of the game, right before he confronts Eve alongside 2B, he hacks into the bunker and ends up finding out that there's things that just don't add up in the files in the bunker, and is confronted by the commander about it. And she admits to him that humanity has gone extinct. There are no humans left. The human resistance on the moon, the hundreds of thousands of humans that are supposed to be there, don't exist. No humans ever escaped to the moon. All the humans died before the aliens even got there. So humans designed androids, and then thousands and thousands of years later, the androids that were fighting against the machines and created Yorha in order to boost morale for all the machines and feel like they had a reason to exist.
For all the androids?
Yeah, for all the...
Okay, so Yorha was essentially born from androids for androids because there were no more humans left.
Yeah.
So 9S learns that humanity is extinct. I guess it's kind of like losing your purpose in life, you know, that all these androids were designed to fight for humans, you know, glory to mankind is their slogan.
Yeah, then at that point, their whole reason to exist is just kind of gone. I mean, obviously, they'd still have a reason to exist because of their personal connections and everything.
Right.
But that's one massive, massive element of their lives. What their original purpose was just completely gone.
And this is kind of Yoko Taro's way of introducing the theme of nihilism, you know, the idea that life is meaningless without a purpose. But even after 9S learns that humanity is extinct, he's not as devastated as you would expect, because he has these other life connections. Like, he's still got 2B and
the operators
and everyone else, so it doesn't seem that hopeless, because I think 9S's main purpose isn't really, I mean, yes, it is to fight for Yorha, but he's also found and made new purposes, and like you said, he's very emotionally connected to 2B.
So during the third part of the game, which takes place for 9S extremely soon after he learns about humanity being extinct. At this point, he still intends to fight for Yorha and fight alongside 2B, and he's gonna tell the truth to her about humanity and everything. The commander gives him the freedom to do what he wants with the information that he was given. But he kind of starts noticing that Yorha's acting a little differently. Like his operator starts treating him like a child, like with the way she talks and everything. Like he even says, "You're treating me like a kid." And she says, "What? I don't know what you're talking about. Just go do your job." She keeps treating him like that, and he keeps noticing just weird off things happening with Yorha. He seems almost a little deflated. He seems like he doesn't care as much about his missions, but he still goes through with them. But then what ultimately ends up destroying his sense of meaning in the world is when the entirety of Yorha is corrupted by a logic virus that they themselves corrupted themselves with on purpose, and 2B ends up dying at the hands of A2. Now, from his perspective, A2 is just a murderer who killed 2B for no reason, but 2B wanted A2 to do it and wanted her to continue on her legacy almost and make sure that 9S was okay and that he continued being himself a good person at heart. 9S ends up doing the opposite. He ends up kind of slowly descending into madness as his sense of nihilism just grows and grows, because at this point he has nothing left in the world. Right. Everything he knew was a lie, and everyone that he knows is now dead.
Yeah, or at least everyone he cares about.
Yeah.
Even when A2 tells 9S that she killed 2B out of mercy, and because 2B was actually asking her to, because 2B was already infected with the virus,
right,
and was gonna die anyway.
Yeah, or at least be corrupted, and at that point, she didn't want 9S to see herself like that, most likely.
She was trying to spare him, or spare 9S in that sense, but ultimately all you see from 9S's perspective is 2B being
A2.
murdered by A2.
Yeah.
That's where I think you're right, the nihilism really sets in for 9S, because even though he had already lost purpose with Yorha, he at least still had 2B, but when she's gone, he really has nothing, and I think having no purpose in a world is enough to drive anyone to madness.
Right. To cover nihilism real quick, nihilism was a philosophy created by Friedrich Nietzsche, or at least popularized by him, that involved basically the belief that there is no inherent meaning to anything in the world, and that your life is pretty much meaningless.
So a true nihilist would believe in nothing. They have no ties to anyone or loyalties, no purpose other than perhaps to destroy.
Yeah, which perfectly encapsulates 9S by the end of the game. He feels there's no meaning to his life. He has no purpose other than just kill A2, and that's all he feels his life is worth, is just to be able to go after and kill A2.
And that's to avenge 2B's
Right.
death. And so, I mean, and he says it himself, even if he were to kill A2, then he really would just want to die, because there's nothing after that.
Yeah.
You know, if he could accomplish that, there's nothing for him in this world anymore. So that's kind of like his sole purpose towards the end of the game is, you know, avenge 2B and then...
Yeah, just not have any reason to exist. Whether he went on living or not, it wouldn't matter for him. 9S in the root C of the game honestly has pretty subtle, kind of slow character development, or descent in this case. He goes from being kind of irritated almost at Yorha, or a little skeptical of them because of what he learned, but he wants to keep on living and fighting alongside 2B and everything. And then once 2B dies, you can notice he goes kind of crazier and crazier throughout the game, but it gets to a really, really bad point at the end of the game where you think he's going up this tower to stop the machines and to try and save what's left of the Earth and everything and androids, but really he's still just trying to find A2, and ultimately that's all that matters to him, is finding A2 and killing her. We're going to give a little bit of context on A2 because her character becomes extremely important during the root C of the game. So you only meet A2 once in the first 2/3 of the game, really. It's when she kills the Forest King and then fights against 9S and 2B. And she ends up retreating and just saying that Yorha has betrayed them, pretty much. I forget how much of this is actually said in-game, but what we know about A2 is that she was betrayed by Yorha. She was one of the original prototype Yorha models, hence A2. She basically lost all her comrades on an assault on Pearl Harbor, however many years ago. And at this point, she has no meaning in life. She fits the mold of nihilism perfectly. She doesn't have any meaning, she has no connection. Her only purpose is to destroy machines. And If Yorha models come after her, she'll kill them. But other than that, all she wants is to kill machines. And even then she doesn't really want that. That's just the only thing that
she knows.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But once she kills 2B and takes her sword, which has all her memories and everything, and kind of learns more about the situation, she ends up forming more connections with people, like at the resistance camp and Pascal's village and everything. She ends up going from just wanting to kill machines to wanting to help others, pretty much.
Right, so she regains a purpose in life again, kind of through 2B. It's not an immediate thing, but, when 2B gives her access to her memories via the sword, she gets a changed perspective on life and, is kind of more open-minded to some things that she otherwise had closed herself off to.
Yeah.
It's interesting to look at A2 compared to 9S because she is kind of like the opposite of him in a way, whereas she started out a nihilist and then eventually discovered a purpose in life and became humanity's hero pretty much at the end of the game.
Or, well Android's hero.
Android's hero, but I guess she was the one who preserved
the idea of humanity.
The idea of humanity. Yeah. It's interesting to look at that compared to 9S, where he starts out having that strong purpose already.
So A2, it's more subtle how she ends up developing. She doesn't have like any clear turning point other than after killing 2B, but even after that she stays kind of nihilistic for a bit, but ends up helping out others and forming connections with others and realizing kind of what 2B wanted her to do. And as she continues on, she ends up going to the machine tower to chase after 9S and potentially save the world. As she goes for the tower, she realizes that it's almost like a cannon pointing to the moon to try and blow up the remains of humanity. At this point, I'm actually unsure if she knows that humans are extinct or not. I think she learns that later on. But when she does learn it, it doesn't matter to her. She doesn't care that humans are extinct. It's the idea of humanity matters to her, and that androids kind of need humanity or the idea of it to live their lives and have meaning in their lives.
They are the things that are gonna continue humanity's legacy, which I think she ultimately at the end understands really is important. And I think that it's important that she plays the last part because, she knew what it was like to live without a purpose. So for her to realize again that life isn't just meaningless and that there are actually things that you can enjoy about life, your emotions, they can be miserable, but they can also be the most wonderful experiences.
Yeah, and A2 actually almost says that exact thing near, like, at the very end of the game where she's explaining something that 9S kind of always already knew, was that 2B was always paired with him and was forced to kill him over and over because he'd always get too close to learning the secret of humanity being extinct. And Yorha couldn't have that for obvious reasons, but he was such a good model and was too smart for his own good and would adapt too quickly. So they had to have 2B kill him so that they could reset his memories. But despite that, 2B, every single time, she grew attached to him, she talked to him, she grew to love him in a sense, and was devastated every time she had to kill him, but she kept working with him anyway and growing attached to him anyway. So she took, all the worst moments of her life, having to kill 9S over and over. She dealt with that because of the good parts of being able to grow attached to 9S over and over.
Mm-hmm.
So even at the end of the game, when A2 explains that 2B was designed to kill 9S every single time that he started learning too much, whether that be the truth about Yorha or the truth about 2B. And despite that, after A2 explains this to him, she follows it up with saying, "But you knew that, didn't you?" So it's implied that 9S throughout pretty much the entire game, had some sort of recollection that, or knowledge that 2B was meant to kill him and was going to kill him at some point, but he didn't really seem to care that she did. He valued the time with her anyway, and it's revealed in the Memory Cage novella, I believe it's called. It was a prequel to the game, that at one point in a previous cycle, I guess, of 9S's life, that he tried to preemptively kill 2B before she was actually assigned to kill him. So he's gone through this multiple times, and he seems to have some memories of it, but despite that, he chooses to get to know 2B, and there's even a line, it's a super subtle small detail earlier on in the game when 9S's pod explains revenge to him, because some machine life forms were trying to get revenge for their family, and explains how revenge for like death and family members was often seen as justified. And 9S just says, but despite that, and it kind of trails off there. And I almost feel like that could be applied to his situation with 2B, where he knows that she's killed him multiple times, and he knows that he should be justified, or theoretically he should be justified in wanting revenge, but he feels like he's not. He doesn't really want revenge, or maybe he does. He's conflicted deep down. You know, there's no real confirmation one way or the other on how 9S feels about this whole thing, other than he doesn't feel like he's justified in wanting revenge for her killing him, and that he still, despite having this knowledge, wants to form an attachment with her every single time, it seems like. At the ending of Route A and B, when she has to kill him because he got corrupted by this machine virus and that data couldn't be uploaded to the bunker, she kills him and then says, why does it always end like this? Why does it always have to end like this?
Right. So she also already goes into whatever mission that they're going to do together knowing that she will end up killing him. And she probably doesn't feel like that's justified.
Right.
But sticks by him anyway. And
in 9S's ending, there's kind of an interesting thing that happens where he kills A2, he manages to kill A2, but he becomes mortally wounded himself. And but we learned in a little almost like text adventure type thing afterwards, the machines seeing the raw emotion from 9S and A2 and everything, decide that instead of shooting a cannon at the moon and destroying what is left of humans, their information and everything, instead of that, they decide to shoot an arc into space containing machine information from who knows how long, and with it new versions of Adam and Eve who have kind of evolved to be more caring, pretty much, more compassionate. And we don't know if any of this is actually real or if it's just like a hallucination by 9S or whatever, but I like to believe it's real in this case. And they offer 9S the chance to upload his data into the Ark or just stay on Earth by himself all alone, and you get to make that decision. But the fact that the machines see these horrible events transpire and go, we need to make something more compassionate, something that can continue living for forever out in space, and start a new life on another planet, start a new society and everything. I just think it's interesting that 9S's nihilism gives the machines a new meaning to life almost.
And it turns out, so the game actually has 26 endings?
Yeah.
So
with 21 of them being joke endings for the most part.
So essentially you have to complete 4 of the endings, A, B, C, and D,
right, before
you can actually get the true ending of the game, ending E. Kellan, do you want to explain a little bit how the sequencing of it works?
Yeah, so ending A happens once 2B and 9S defeat Eve while you're playing as 2B. Then ending B occurs when it's the same spot, but when you're playing as 9S. Ending C is when you play as A2 and fight against 9S at the end. And then ending D is when you choose to play as 9S and kill A2. So to acquire ending E, you have to get A, B, C, and D, and then go back into a chapter select and choose the chapter that has the last cutscene.
Essentially, ending E, the credits are playing as well, and
right,
the credits turn into the enemy.
Yeah, well, they don't even turn into the enemies. They're just, the credits are the enemies, and they shoot things at you.
Yeah.
So you'll see, Yoko Taro's name, and he's shooting things at you, and then you'll see Square Enix Ltd. Or whatever, and they're shooting things at you. It's every time you die, because you're going to die during the credit sequence. Every time you die, it asks a new question.
And the first one is, do you admit defeat? And it gives you a yes or no answer, and you have to continue, and you have to say no to keep going on.
Right.
And then it progresses, so is it all pointless? Do you think games are silly little things? Do you admit there is no meaning in this world? And you have to say no to pretty much all of them, except for the last one, which is there compassion within society?
But while you're going through this, I don't know a single person who would not answer no to all those questions, or to most of those questions, because you're supposed to, at that point in the game, you have just such a overflow of emotion, and stuff like that. That this is not, it can't end here. You have to keep going. you can't admit defeat. And every time you die, more and more messages pop up from people all around the world, their usernames and everything. And after you say that there is compassion within society, you can request assistance, and at that point, several more little cursors like you have, flood around you, and you end up becoming way more powerful, unified as like with other people. And at that point, every time you get hit, someone's save data somewhere in the world gets deleted.
Right, because that's actually like real people's
usernames. Yeah, and messages and everything.
So it's really cool at the end of the game to see that they actually tie you in with other people that have played this game, and it's actually their save data that is helping you beat the final boss.
Yeah, right. And then once you make it through that segment, it ends on a very positive note. So there is a meaning to life, and it's that the connections you make with other people are what gives life meaning. Even if it's just random people online who send you nice messages and sacrifice their save data for you, you have a connection with them in some way, and that connection is what lets you beat the game and lets you see that life does have meaning. It doesn't matter if we go through hardships and everything, that in the end
it's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it.
Why is that?
I launched a suicide attack, and yet here I am, still alive. I must look very silly.
Do not feel bad about it. We are alive, after all. And being alive is pretty much a constant stream of embarrassment.
That concept is a bit too abstract for me to understand at this time. I will save it in my list of things to analyze later.
Question, Pod 042. Did the data salvage restore all of their past memories?
Yes.
And are those recovered parts of the same design as previous ones?
Yes.
Then, won't that simply lead us to the same conclusion as before?
I cannot deny the possibility. However, the possibility of a different future also exists. A future is not given to you. It is something you must take for yourself.